Welcome, brave listeners, to Wilhelm Presents Frightening Tales. I'm your host, Wilhelm. Tune in each week where I entertain my listeners with another dark and creepy tale of the paranormal, donated by authors from all over this world. If you're an author of some paranormal fiction and would like to share a story with my listeners, submit one at frighteningtales.com. And while you're there, tune in for more than 100 episodes of previous content. Today's episode is a triple feature. That means there's 3 stories. Just think, 3 times the nightmare fuel. The first tale is written by Deidra Lovegren, who frequently competes in international writing contests and often loses. Her published works include The Medicine Girl, The Medicine Woman, and 21 Conversations, a collection of dialogue-only short stories. You can also find her anthology, The Lady of the Match. Her work, translated into Arabic, debuted at the 2024 Cairo International Book Fair. Throughout Deidra's career, she has taught English and writing at every level, from preschool to college. She currently serves as a humanities instructor at a private high school. But now her tale, that she calls The Smoke of Her Burning.
It had always been cold in Denmark, especially on New Year's Eve. The wintry winds brought a desperate chill to those unsettled and impoverished. Wars continued to ravage the land. Treaties were torn up as soon as they were signed. Industrialization poisoned Scandinavian cities and its people. The young moved west for better opportunities in warmer climes, leaving the rich, the poor, and the poor's children on the streets of Copenhagen. The rich fared no worse, no matter how many people left the country. Wherever nations drew their boundaries or whose currency was exchanged, as long as gold lay in their coffers, the rich slept soundly. The matchwoman seldom slept at all. As for gold, the only gold she had was in the flecks in her eyes, the dark eyes that missed nothing. Hunched over her rickety table at the Jensen and Sonderberg factory, she dipped wooden splints into sulfur, a dozen or so at a time. She was forbidden to sit. A cloud of noxious gas hung about, giving her workshop its bluish-green glow and garlicky smell. Rashes had crusted over the calluses of her hands as she artfully tipped each splint with a mixture of sugar and phosphorus for the strike-anywhere matches. They were enormously popular, and the only kind that sold well on the streets. The matchwoman coughed into her handkerchief, careful to be quiet about it. If the Mesters knew she was ill, they would have sacked her before she met her quota. She frowned at the blood in her hand, familiar with the signs of tuberculosis. People her mother's age had called it consumption, as the disease consumed whomever it afflicted. It certainly had consumed her mother, bit by bit. At the end of her 12-hour shift, the matchwoman wrapped her aching jaw in a thin scarf, put on her hat, and walked home. She paused to retch in an alleyway, leaning against an icy wall. She vomited up fluorescent emesis. At first, no one noticed the matchwoman when she entered the boarding house. With the half a Danish krone she earned each day, she rented a squalid room It was quiet now that her husband had fled and her children had died. There were plenty of children from other borders, returning from sweeping chimneys and cleaning mills. Unlike her own children, these others were churlish, bowed by rickets and scurvy. They often fought over the thin stew the oodlager served. The stew was watery, but at least it was warm.
What is that?
The oodlager asked, motioning to the matchwoman's jar. The matchwoman did not reply to her landlady's query.
Fossy KB?
She spat, looking at the matchwoman more closely.
I won't have Fossy Jaw in my establishment. Bah!
Another tenant exclaimed, moving away from the matchwoman and making the sign of the cross.
Get your things and get out,
the oodlager ordered, clearing her bowl. There was nothing left to do but go and pack her few things. She silently left the dining hall and walked down the darkened corridor to her room. She pulled out her mother's small trunk from under her bed, and then she pushed it back. She was too tired to pack. In the relative warmth of her room, the matchwoman kicked off her worn boots and sat on the lumpy mattress, stuffed with corn husks and straw, pondering her fate. She touched her swollen jaw. Her tongue felt a few of her remaining teeth, loosened by the phosphorus fumes. From her years at Jensen and Sonderberg, she knew what to expect. As the bone infection grew worse, her flesh would begin to reek, making her unwelcome in close quarters. Her teeth would fall out one by one. Perhaps the rotting pus would spread to her eye sockets, leaving her blind. She'd passed enough street beggars who suffered from the same fate. Girls much younger than she. Eventually, the matchwoman would need money to pay for a surgeon to remove her jaw entirely, dividing it at the joint and dragging out the halves separately. Standing, she opened the small closet and began to fold her clothes, a tumble of shreds and patches. She had 2 pairs of socks, one of her mother's Christmas ornaments, a baby shoe, a picture of her beloved grandmother, and a box of matches. She tucked the picture of her grandmother into her bodice and took the matches. Bareheaded and barefoot, she left the room for the last time. Walked down the corridor, through the front parlor, and into the street. As the icy flakes fell on her head, the matchwoman remembered how her thinning hair used to hang in pretty curls down her neck. Her grandmother had fashioned it into braids with pretty ribbons. "You are an angel," her grandmother had said, slipping holiday treats into her hands. Her butter cookies had melted on the matchwoman's tongue. "And you stay out, you filthy leper!" the oodlager yelled at her before slamming the front door. The matchwoman stood still. There was nowhere for her to go. In time, she imagined the boarding house tenants singing, drinking glögg, eating butter cookies, preparing for the new year. As her hands were almost dead with cold, she decided to light one match to warm herself. Ratch! The Strike Anywhere match lived up to its name, quickly sparking into a bright flame. She sighed with pleasure at its warmth, a respite from the bitterly cold night. In its flickering light she remembered her father, teaching her brothers how to make a fire. If she closed her eyes, she could see her father setting the kindling just so to make a hearty blaze in their fireplace. But when he was drinking, he beat her. Her mother had sung in the kitchen warm cider and baking tarts, but when her father left them, her mother had sickened and died. Lost in her reverie, the match burned out, singeing her fingers. She held the remains of the burnt match in her hand. The oodlager had watched the matchwoman from a window, eating a thick slice of fruit loaf, washing it down with wassail. "You burned your hands, you idiot," the landlady taunted her. "The phosphorus is eating your brain. Move along, you're trespassing. Get out." The matchwoman stood silent in the snowdrift as the flakes fell. With a harsh laugh, the oodlager called down curses on the matchwoman's family before closing the window shutter. The matchwoman approached the boarding house and lit another match. With match in hand, she reached up to light the thatched roof. The straw burned quickly and bright. It was close to midnight. All of Copenhagen seemed to be inside, feasting and drinking and preparing to usher in the new year. All except for the matchwoman. As she passed by the street corner where she'd sold matches as a girl, she lit and flicked matches with reckless abandon. Each time a pile of rags or a puddle of kerosene or bale of hay ignited, the gold in her eyes glittered. Ratch! 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 On her blue-gray feet, she walked through the frozen lanes and plumes of smoke, hearing cries of alarm and shrieks of terror behind her. As the fires of Copenhagen spread from structure to structure, the firemen could not find water with which to douse them. All of it had turned to ice. The matchwoman could have found her way to Jensen and Sonderberg with her eyes closed, as she spent most of her life trudging back and forth, down the lanes, through the side entrance, up the staircase to the factory floor. Taking her grandmother's picture from her bodice, she kissed it once. "You promised to meet me at the end," she said. "Bring me the butter cookies you used to make for the new year." It took her a little while, but she eventually gathered all of the matchboxes, stacking them neatly by her workspace. Hunched over her rickety table, she poured out the white phosphorus, a dozen bottles or so at a time. Before she struck her last match, she considered how matches were such little things, disposable after being used up and burnt out. Just like a match, she, too, was capable of both warming and burning, and the matchwoman felt it was time to burn. Ratch!
Our second story is written by Lee Ann Burley, an American author who writes across multiple genres, including literary fiction. She has written a number of short stories, and her story, Her Father, was published by Calla Press Publishing. She is also listed as an author in an Amazon book, Endless Possibilities. Burley's work has been described as blending suspense and character-driven narratives. And this is certainly true in her tale, Row Houses on Canal Street.
I fear abandonment, huffed and puffed Ricky. A townhouse whose chimney needed cleaning. Relax, Charlie assured everyone. People will continue to live in the row houses on Canal Street. Russell, a brownstone with a green door near the end of the row, stated, Charlie, the rumor of ghost haunting started under your roof. It was a harmless comment made by a 9-year-old girl to impress her friend on Halloween, said Charlie. But you failed to contain it, said Gerald, a house with a purple door. We are respectable homes for respectable families. A vacant house is a deteriorating home with a death knoll, trembled Henry, a brownstone with an orange door. As the setting sun spread rose-colored rays across their windows, the row houses' spirits sank as they pictured their homes disintegrating. The important thing is to quell these rampant rumors, said practical Susie, a townhouse with a bright yellow door. Do you have a plan, Charlie? To squash ghost stories before families vacate, said Sam, a house with a black door. Charlie suggested, we let the rumors die down. Folks have limited attention spans. We can't afford to draw attention to ourselves, groaned Peter, a brownstone with an indigo door. We need to continue hiding who we are. Yes, that's the greater danger, said Brenda, an anxious row house with a red door. Charlie organized a meeting to address any lingering rumors. Rumors about haunted houses spread like wildfire, urging families to move out of their homes. Even with reduced prices, realtors worry that houses on Canal Street will not attract buyers. The merchants took advantage of the chance to promote their town as a ghostly tourist destination. The parents of my house are packing and taking their 2 children to live with their mother, said Renee, a home with a powder blue door. She sobbed. No one will ever buy me, and I will be alone for the rest of my life. Leaning in, Susie said, We're here for you, Rennie. I'm sure another fine family will move in. But what if they don't? Creaked Henry, a row house with a beige door. For our sakes, we need to do something before these rumors become solid, declared Sam, slamming a door. The row houses set up a committee of Charlie, Susie, Russell, and Sam to develop concrete plans to dispel the notion of apparitions. Meanwhile, local news interviewed an older woman who claimed a young woman in an 18th century dress was staring out of an upper-story window in one of the row houses on Canal Street. A mailman swore he saw a young man dressed in 18th century clothes sitting on a rocking chair on a veranda, and when he looked closer, the apparition vanished. Others insisted they had seen their deceased loved ones wandering around the town. Sitting on his haunches, Ricky said, "We must act before it's too late." Shifting on his foundation, Charlie said, "I will talk to Sandy." "She's a child," popped Brenda. "It's forbidden to talk to humans. There must be another way," groaned Susie. "I wish there were," Charlie sighed. "He's right," said Peter. "How will you do it?" creaked Fred, rattling his forest green shutters. "Just before she wakes, I will whisper in her ear that there are no such things as ghosts, and to inform her mother that it was her imagination." "It might work," said Gerald, "as long as you do it before she wakes up." But the dream vanished as Sandy readied for school. Chief Councilman Hank Rutledge called a town hall meeting to discuss the vacant houses on Canal Street and devise concrete steps to calm the escalating hysteria. "These ghoulish tales need to end before more folks wake up and leave town," declared Hank. "I agree," said Adam Smith, who owned a realtor business. "What do you propose?" James Byron, head of the travel bureau, agreed to suspend marketing ghost sightings until things calmed down. "I've assembled an investigation team to determine how and where these false stories originated," said Hank. "When we find the culprit, we'll expose and correct these baseless lies." Larry Mills, a young entrepreneur, proposed hiring paranormal experts to determine if the living dead inhabited their quaint town. Hank agreed, accommodating ghost believers. "Besides, nothing will come of it anyway," adding to his case of the non-existence of ghosts, allowing the city to resume its routine rhythms. But the two ghost hunters tied in having and not having ghosts in the row houses only complicated matters, dividing the village into two camps, each hurling insults at the other. One day, Charlene Baxton, seeing her daughter Sandy looking sad, asked, "What's the matter, honey?" "I miss playing with Beth. I don't know why she has to move away." Hugging her daughter, she said, "Someone ignited gossip on Halloween about a ghost in our house." Sandy hung her head and whispered, "I did it." "What are you saying?" "I told Beth last Halloween that a ghost named Charlie roams our house." "Oh, honey. You know there are no ghosts," Sandy confessed, her gaze averted. "I found Halloween thrilling with a ghost story." "I know you didn't mean any harm by it, but these imagined ghost sightings have mushroomed into chaos." Charlene took Sandy to Beth's house to apologize for fabricating a tale. Then everyone went to Hank's office to relay the message that the ghost story was false. The councilman convenes another meeting to update the public, and life returns to normal. Charlie enjoys peace when his family attends the Christmas parade, once he finishes a comprehensive inspection of the house. He takes a nap. Sandy pretends to have a stomach ache and convinces her parents to let her go home and rest. Carefully, the girl enters her home and hears Charlie's peaceful snoozing. Draped in a white sheet, she calls, "Charlie, oh Charlie." He jolts awake to a ghostly figure sprinting, laughing, slamming doors, vanishing, and reappearing again. When Sandy stops, she whips off the sheet and says, Hello, Charlie. I'm delighted to make the acquaintance of our ghostly resident. Charlie remained stiff and motionless. The girl admired the talking house disguise while acknowledging the common knowledge that houses cannot speak. You owe me one for covering for you through my reverse false confession that ghosts aren't real. The silence continues. I'm still waiting, Sandy declared, settling his quaking timbers. Charlie said, That was a close call for us, Sandy. You are a clever one. What is your preference? A mean bully is causing trouble at school. Ian Pritchard is his name, and he lives with his family in Russell's residence. Go tell Russell to scare the pants off of him.
Our third and final story is written by Laura Melvin, an author from British Columbia, Canada, where she writes a number of short stories that she publishes in her profile on dailyprompt.com, which you can visit for more of her writing. Here is her tale, Floor 19.
Josephine settled into her chair, putting her coffee on the desk. Steam rose in tendrils from the mug. She gave herself a few seconds to get used to the blue light from the screens before adjusting the monitors to her liking. Mark on day shift always pushed them too far out until the screens almost formed a straight line. She liked to angle the two outer ones inwards, encasing herself in the world she watched on the screens. Most offices closed at night. Only custodians and the odd employee trying to meet a deadline stayed past 5 o'clock. But Dynachem was a 24-hour building. The labs on the upper floors of the 20-story tower were always busy. Though she couldn't see into the labs themselves, Josephine loved watching the lab techs in their white coats slowly meander the long hallways, stopping to chat with one another. She got the sense they didn't get out much, especially those on the night shift. Those small moments of human interaction must be the highlight of their day. She made up stories for each of them. Johnny and Maya were having a passionate love affair, much to the dismay of her lab assistant Tom, who was clearly in love with her. Ben was stealing lab supplies and sneaking them out underneath his lab coat, causing it to bulge in strange places. Stephanie and her blunt black bob and high heels was clearly a villainess, undercover at Dynachem, and making a chemical weapon to sell on the black market for millions. Josephine scanned the tiny, rectangular video feeds spread across the 3 monitors until she found what she was looking for. Bradley. Bradley was everything you'd expect in a junior lab tech. Thick framed glasses, unkempt hair, tall, lanky, and charmingly awkward. She sighed and rested her chin on her hand, watching Bradley ease his way out of Lab C while carrying a rack with 3 test tubes filled with liquid. "What are you doing?" she muttered to the screen, sitting up straight. She'd never seen the techs transport anything out of their labs before. It was protocol to keep all materials in their respective labs to prevent contamination. Bradley wasn't moving with his normal, casual gait. There was no meandering or stopping to chit-chat. He walked quickly, head darting back and forth, eyes skipping over the other techs in the hall. They all stopped and watched as he sped past them. She saw a few mouths move. There was no sound from the video feeds, no doubt asking him what he was doing, but he didn't stop. She followed him across the rectangular feeds as he moved from one zone to the next. He disappeared for a moment. She reached for her radio, holding it to her mouth, ready to alert the other guards that there was suspicious movement on floor 19. Bradley reappeared on screen, standing in the middle of the cafeteria, and he wasn't alone. 2 other lab techs stood on his left and right, each holding one of the test tubes. Simultaneously, the 3 drank the liquid and threw the empty tubes to the ground. The effect was instantaneous. Their bodies began to jerk and writhe like they were seizing, but they were moving so fast it was just a blur of movement on the screen. Limbs elongated to impossible lengths, their arms extended from their bodies like the legs of a spider, bending at the elbow, growing so long their knuckles nearly rested on the floor. Then their legs began to stretch, sending their heads nearly up to the ceiling until their torsos were balanced on 2 spindly, stick-like legs. When the seizing stopped, all 3 dropped their hands to the floor, elbows bent, knees splayed to the side. Josephine gasped as they scuttled to the cafeteria doors like crabs across the sand. "Code Black!" she croaked into the radio. "Code Black! Three mutations on floor 19. I repeat, 3 mutations on floor 19. A pause. "Please repeat?" a voice crackled at the other end. "Code Black, floor 19. Josephine shouted into the radio. "Understood," crackled the voice on the other end. "What is their current location?" Josephine scanned the screens. She found them quickly just outside the cafeteria doors. "Outside the cafeteria," she said into the radio, regaining her composure. "I'll monitor and report any movement." "Copy that. Approaching now." She watched as 3 lab techs stood eerily still on their elongated limbs, 2 facing towards the camera and 1 facing away. "Commander," Josephine whispered into the radio, hoping to keep quiet enough the techs wouldn't hear if the guards were close. "Commander, I think they're waiting for..." The radio clattered to the ground as Josephine watched the commander and 3 other guards converge on the techs. Without moving from their position, the lab techs reached out their overstretched limbs and thrust their hands into each of the guards' chests, ripping out their heart in a way that splattered the hallway's white walls. Josephine slammed her hand into the red button beneath the monitors, activating the alarm that signaled lockdown. The tech, with his back to the camera, held 2 hearts in his hands. Without moving the rest of his body, he turned his head almost 180 degrees to look behind him. A strangled cry escaped Josephine as she took in the thick-framed glasses, the messy hair. Bradley, staring into the camera. Bradley stretched his mouth past human ability into an unnatural feral grin before smashing one of the hearts into the camera lens, and the video feed went black.
Thank you, brave listeners, for joining me on another dark story. I urge all my listeners to go out and find more content by our weekly author, if you're not too timid. If you enjoyed today's story and you've tuned in on YouTube, please click the like button. And if you don't want to miss further stories, click the subscribe button. And if you are present today on Spotify and enjoyed the story, you're only more than welcome to leave a comment. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave the show a rating as you see fit. All these little things help the show. And wherever you listen, please do me a favor and share today's story, if you can. Then tune in next week for another frightening tale, if you're brave enough.